try to keep flexible, try to move just a little bit. I'm going to stay in front of the camera though.
We can handle
Just in
that.
case everybody's sitting in the back, that gives me the opportunity to go back and visit with everybody back there. Bishop Hoagland has invited us to read with him as a book as we journey through Lent. The book is called Practical Mysticism. It's by Evelyn Underhill. In some ways, that book is a challenge to read. Evelyn finished writing it just before the First World War, when the language was just a little bit different than what it is today. In fact, it was published during the first days of the war. So it's just a little bit different. I'm not used to reading he did this and he that and he the other thing. I'm more used to now he and she. In the preface of the book, she presents some truths about the world and about people. In particular, people about to enter into a war, a great war. One of those truths is essential to us, I think, on our journey through this Lent. She writes, "We are often told that in critical periods of history, it is the national soul which counts, and that where there is no vision, people perish." Where there is no vision, people perish. And that is a truth that applies to so many things, so many ways. A parish that has no vision outside of itself will probably die a slow death. And I've just seen one die that way. Through reading and through several years of listening, several years of observing, several years of experiencing things, I believe that children growing in the world today and many young adults seek ways of serving other people. People both inside and outside their immediate frame of reference. They don't necessarily have to know that person. It doesn't have to be a neighbor. It could be somebody all the way across the country. My granddaughter, not too long ago, went out to Missouri to help people in Africa. They seek ways of doing for others. For the church to inspire them, it takes more than just the words. It takes more than campfire songs. It takes more than a band up front. It takes more than a really great worship service. Although these are definitely a part of it. It takes a strong vision for outreach. Something that they can really get into and do. Something that they can put their whole soul, their whole being into and go and do that. Think about Abram and Sarai in today's first lesson. And that was a very good reading, by the way. They had lived a very good life. Abram had traveled with his father Terah from Ur of the Chaldeans to Haran, a place where Barbara and I have been. In Haran, he married Sarai. And as young adults, Abram and Sarai didn't have any children of their own. But God asked Abram to lead a group of his people and leave their father's house and go to the land of the Canaanites. And this he did. He followed that vision. And with Sarah by his side, he kept on leading the people through thick and thin. If you go through Genesis, you can hear that story. He immersed himself fully into the leadership. This was God's vision for him. This was God's vision for Sarai. And the story tells us that when Abraham was 99 years old, when he was 99 years old, God sent word that he and Sarai would become parents. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm 72 now. And I can see myself at 92. And I think I would chuckle just a little bit there. God told them that they would become the ancestor of a multitude of nations. Even kings would come from this line, from their loins. There needed to be a future. There needed to be more than just coming to this new land. They needed to reach out in a very real way. And God changed their names to mark that change in vision. And that's what we heard today, this part of the story we heard today. For with children comes a whole new vision. Abram's name became Abraham, which means father of multitudes. Sarai became Sarah, which means princess. As old as she might have been, with her new name came the end of their time without children. There was a new vision. It was a new task for them to do. Okay, story time. There's a story about a man who was eager to receive the kind of attention and special treatment, that at least he thought it was special treatment, that he had seen people lavish on Sufi masters. So he sought out one of the Sufi. He went out and found Mullah, and he inquired about the length of the course that it would take for him to become a Sufi, a teacher. 10 years, replied the Mullah. What if I studied twice as hard? Asked the man. 20 years, said the Mullah. Wait a minute now. What if I studied 3 times as hard? Asked the man. 30 years, came the reply. How can that be? Asked the confused aspirant. When one eye is fixed on fame and glory, said the Mullah, there is only one eye left to find your way. That's why it's so much longer. Abraham was a man who followed the visions that God had set out for him. He followed them not for his own glory, but for the good of the people and for future generations. Even in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham argued with God or tried to bargain with God. Well, what if I can find 100? Well, how about 99? Would you still? He worked them all the way down, I think, to 10. And Sodom and Gomorrah still got annihilated. But he didn't do that for himself. He did that for the other people. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah. In her book, Evelyn Underhill defines the word mysticism. Oh, that's a word that brings up magic and so forth in our minds. Mysticism as the art of a union with reality. Oh, yeah, Father, but that sounds nice, but what does it really mean? It means the patriot knows his country. The artist knows the subject of his or her art. A lover who completely loves knows his or her lover. The saint knows God in a very special way. The person becomes so immersed in the subject that they are one with that subject. That is a mystic. Is no longer glory to the self, but to the whole. Can I pick on the choir and the...
Oh, the whole band is here.
The band? Okay. All right. So let's pick on the choir, especially the choir. When a person first picks up a sheet of music, or when you have your guitar and you pick up a sheet of music, it's probably somewhat foreign to you if you've never seen it before. Yes, you might know how to read music and you know where the notes are on the guitar or on the piano or something else. And yes, you know how to read the words so you get the right words in the right spots with the right notes. But still, the first time you try to sing it or try to play it, it's not quite the same as it might be later. It's a little bit foreign to you. Something's missing. When I was a deacon here, I would sometimes come and just sit in the back, and the choir would be over there practicing. And I've heard the same song sung over and over and over again. I've listened as the choir director asked for only the basses to sing. Or, all right, now the tenors. Let's hear it from the tenors. And then the altos, and then the sopranos. And for each group, he'd give some thoughts and have them try it again, and again, and again. What happens is that by the time you put all of this back together again, people have become so familiar with that music that they unite with the music. And what comes out is not a group of individuals singing. It's something far greater. Someplace in there, a quantum leap has taken place, and the choir has experienced a mystic joining with the music. There's a tremendous beauty in what comes forth. Think of last week's anthem. If you were here last week, think of the anthem. That was absolutely gorgeous. But I know it's not the first time they sang it. Because it came through just beautifully when everything melded together. That's being mystic with that music. It's a radical change from what was. Jesus in today's gospel creates a radical change too. Peter and the others viewed the Messiah as a person who would lead an army against the Romans. Maybe Jesus would be the general and they could be colonels and they'd go out and expel the Romans and get out from under the oppression. And Jesus said, no, I don't think so. He was going to suffer. He was going to be hung on a cross. He was going to die. He was going to be raised again. And I think that's about as radical a change in perception as you could probably have. And Peter tried rebuking Jesus. No, Lord, no, this can't happen. But Jesus rebuked Peter. And this is the second time he said this particular piece, because at the end of his time of Lent, he said it to Satan. Get behind me, Satan. For you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things. Jesus was asking his disciples to take the self out of being a disciple and become fully immersed in the divine. For them, this would not happen until after Jesus had indeed been hung on a cross, until he had been raised and died on that cross, and then raised again and ascended into heaven. Then a new vision would come on the day of Pentecost. And if you follow through, let's say, the Gospel of Luke, and then read Acts, it's a very different set of disciples because they become apostles then. And they go out and do a lot of what Jesus did. The Huffington Post has reported that Pope Francis is not a liberal. He's not a liberal. And I'll agree with that. He is, though, a radical. And by radical, the writer means that he's returning to the origins of the church that are rooted in mercy. Pope Francis wants a missionary church with an open door, not a self-centered, self-pitying church immersed in its own suffering. The Pope's view is that churches are too wrapped up in their own concerns. The church cannot be self-centered, revolving around itself. It needs to be a church on the move. And that's where the children come in, that I was talking about at the beginning of the sermon. It needs to be a church at the center of human existence, not on the periphery, reacting to what everybody else is doing. As I read the bulletin, as I read the newsletters that come from Holy Trinity, as we follow them over a long period of time, I see a parish serving others in many ways, and I commend you for that. But I ask you to keep searching. Keep searching the horizon for new ways to serve the surrounding community. For it's looking outward to the needs of others that will create new visions. It will create new ministries. It'll create radical new ways to heal the hurts of people who need healing. In the world today, think of the 3 million refugees that have crossed borders to get away from the ISIS genocides. Some are in Turkey, some are in Jordan, some I think are in Lebanon, but all the surrounding countries. And think of what it means to be a refugee. You've spent your whole life building a house or paying for a house, and suddenly you have to run away from it. Maybe with your family, maybe not. You might be alone now. And you get across the border to save your life, but you've lost everything. You've left it all behind. If some of those refugees or people that are refugees right now come to this area, what do they need to start life over? When you come with nothing, you need literally everything. If that does happen here, perhaps a new vision would be to ask how you can help. What can be done? And this is just one of many, many different things that are out there. Something to think about, something to pray for, pray about. Something to work on, especially during this Lent and this journey that we have. Amen.